Welcome back to Congress in Context. We're your guides trying to make sense of what's happening on Capitol Hill.
That's right. Today, we're diving into a pretty busy week, focusing on the actions around July 21st, 2025.
Yeah, lots going on. We'll be looking at the legislative highlights, some key political moves, and what it all might mean for you. We pull everything straight from the Congressional Record, debates, the source material.
And our goal, as always, is to cut through the jargon, give you clear explanations, show you the different viewpoints, and hopefully make it all feel a bit more accessible.
Okay, let's jump right in with legislative highlights. It seems like a ton of bills passed the House this week, many under something called suspension of the rules. What does that actually mean in practice?
Right, so suspension is basically a fast-track process. It's used for bills that are generally seen as non-controversial or have pretty broad support from both sides. It lets them skip some of the usual procedural hurdles.
So it signals a certain level of agreement, even if the topic itself might have some, surrounding debate.
Exactly. It shows where Congress can find common ground. And this week, veterans issues were definitely a big focus area for that.
Okay, let's start there. We saw the PRO Veterans Act of 2025, S-423, pass the House. What's the main thrust of this one?
Well, it aims to make some existing VA programs and practices permanent, put them into law. One key part is requiring the VA secretary to give quarterly in-person briefings to Congress about any budget shortfalls.
And that seems timely, right? I remember hearing about some big projected shortfalls last year. Wasn't it like $2.9 billion for the VBA and $12 billion for the VHA?
Precisely. Congress actually had to pass a separate bill, H.R. 9468, pretty quickly to cover that $2.9 billion VBA shortfall. So this S-423 requirement for regular briefings is a direct response to that situation.
But you mentioned surrounding debate, even on something like VA funding.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets, well, interesting. How that shortfall was framed was dramatically different depending on who you asked. Some saw it as, an administrative hiccup, a process that needed fixing.
Okay, a management issue.
But others, particularly on the other side of the aisle, used much stronger language. We heard terms like criminal behavior and malicious intent to deceive Congress. Some even called for DOJ investigations.
Wow. Even though, as the background notes say, the Inspector General and GAO found no actual criminal wrongdoing.
Correct. It really highlights how even something that seems like a budget process issue can get caught up in intense political framing and, frankly, deep mistrust. There were concerns raised that constantly trying to, quote, demonize and demoralize the VA workforce could end up hurting veteran care.
That's quite a divide. Did the PRO Veterans Act do anything else besides the briefings?
Yes, it also put some new limits or guardrails on critical skills incentive bonuses at the VA. Specifically, no bonuses for senior executive service folks in the central office, and others need individual approval, making sure they're proportional. And it officially codifies the Veterans Experience Office, aiming to improve how benefits are delivered.
Okay. Now, still on veterans, there was another bill, the ACZ Act, S-201. Sounds important.
Extremely important and strongly bipartisan. Sponsored by Senators Kelly and Cotton, Representative Pfluger. It actually passed the House back in May with a huge 376-5 vote. Now it's heading to the president's desk.
So what will the ACS Act do?
It directs the National Academies, they're the independent scientific advisory group, to conduct a major study. They'll look into the link between toxic exposures for military pilots and aircrews and the really concerning rates of cancer diagnoses they're experiencing.
I remember hearing about studies showing higher risks for aviators, like testicular cancer, melanoma.
Yeah, a 2021 Air Force study found significantly higher rates. 29% higher for testicular cancer, 24% for melanoma, 23% for prostate cancer compared to the general population. This bill is a direct result of that data, and sadly, stories like Colonel Andrew Shirtless.
Remind us about his story.
He was an Air Force fighter pilot, served 23 years, diagnosed with stage 5E cancer at just 41, and passed away at 48. He actually testified before Congress, hoping that a better understanding could lead to earlier detection for others. This bill really honors that hope. It's a powerful example of personal testimony driving policy.
Definitely a necessary step. Okay, moving away from veterans issues, Congress also looked at some very local problems, specifically related to ZIP codes.
Yeah, it seems kind of mundane, but it's actually a big deal for some communities. There were two bills. H.R. 672 aims to fix issues in about 8 places across the country where fragmented ZIP codes mess up mail, economic development, even public safety response times.
And the other one, H.R. 3095.
That one's more specific. It directs the Postal Service to give single, unique ZIP codes to a list of communities, places like Canyon Lake in California, Castle Pines in Colorado, Weddington, North Carolina, Mills, Wyoming, and others. It passed the House 278 to 121.
Why is getting your own ZIP code so important for these towns? It's more than just mail, you're saying.
Oh, much more. It can impact local tax revenue collection, making sure the right town gets the money. It can definitely improve response times for police, fire, ambulance, because there's less confusion about addresses. And yeah, fewer mail errors. It even helps with planning infrastructure and just building that local identity.
Huh. Never thought about ZIP codes that way.
Yeah.
Okay, what about access to public lands?
There was H.R. 183, the Law Enforcement Officer and Firefighter Recreation Pass Act. Bipartisan again. It basically gives free America the Beautiful, passes for national parks and federal lands to law enforcement officers and firefighters.
So extending a benefit that military members and veterans already get.
Exactly. It's a nod to the critical role first responders play on those lands. You know, fighting wildfires, search and rescue, even law enforcement, like that incident mentioned in Yellowstone where park officers stopped a potential shooter. It's a thank you, really.
Makes sense. And sticking with resources, H.R. 131, the Finish the Arkansas Valley Conduit Act, sounds like a long-running project.
Decades long. This water project for rural Colorado was actually authorized way back in 1962, but costs just kept escalating from around $640 million estimated in 2019 to over $1.3 billion now. It caused huge delays.
So this bill gets it back on track.
That's the goal. It changes the repayment contract to make sure it actually gets finished. This conduit is supposed to deliver reliable drinking water, about 7,500 acre-feet a year, to 50,000 people in 40 different communities. It's a lifeline for them.
Wow, 1962. That's patience.
Mhm.
Okay, shifting to the economy. What happened with economic development and capital markets?
We saw H.R. 1043, the La Paz County Solar Energy and Job Creation Act, bipartisan measure in Arizona. It allows about 3,400 acres of federal land to be conveyed for solar projects.
So jobs, clean energy, any catches?
Well, importantly, it requires consultation with the Colorado River Indian tribes to make sure cultural artifacts are protected. So it tries to balance economic development with cultural respect. It's framed as a win-win, jobs and energy for the county, and the federal government gets a fair return.
Good to hear about the consultation. There were also several bills aimed at small businesses and investments, right? Kind of tweaking SEC rules.
Yeah, a whole cluster of them. H.R. 3382, the Small Entity Update Act, tells the SEC to look at its definition of small entity, basically, making sure small businesses have a real voice when new regulations are developed.
Okay, making definitions fit reality better.
Then H.R. 3351, Improving Access to Small Business Information Act, passed overwhelmingly 387 to 12. This one clarifies that work done by the SEC's Small Business Advocate isn't subject to the Paperwork Reduction Act. The goal is less red tape for small businesses trying to raise capital.
Less paperwork, always popular.
And H.R. 3343, the Greenlighting Growth Act, tackles a specific issue for emerging growth companies that came up after the JOBS Act. It simplifies financial statement requirements when these companies grow by acquiring others. Again, the aim is to encourage expansion and job creation.
So a theme of trying to ease the regulatory burden for smaller and growing companies.
Pretty much, removing hurdles to capital formation and growth.
All right, what about protecting investors, especially older investors?
Yes, H.R. 1469, the National Senior Investor Initiative Act. Broad bipartisan support here. It sets up a special task force within the SEC focused specifically on protecting investors over 65 from fraud, exploitation, and issues related to cognitive decline.
Seems like a needed focus.
Definitely. They'll track threats, recommend policy changes. There's also a GAO study involved to better understand the scale of financial exploitation targeting seniors. It's trying to be proactive.
Well, there's another interesting one, H.R. 3339, the Equal Opportunity for All Investors Act. What's the idea behind that?
This one is quite fascinating. Right now, to invest in certain private markets, things like startups or hedge funds, you generally have to be an accredited investor, which is mostly defined by having a high income or net worth.
Right, you need to be wealthy.
This bill proposes an alternative path. It says you could also qualify by passing a test administered by the SEC, demonstrating you understand the risks involved in these private investments, even if you don't meet the wealth thresholds.
So knowledge over net worth.
Kind of, yeah. It aims to democratize access a bit, saying if you can prove you understand the risks through an exam, you should have the opportunity to participate. It's a shift from just using wealth as a proxy for financial sophistication.
Interesting. And there was a transparency bill, too. H.R. 32357.
Yes, the multi-class shareholder transparency bill. This applies to public companies that have different classes of stock with different voting rights. Sometimes insiders have shares with way more voting power than regular
Like
investors.
super voting shares.
Exactly. This bill requires companies to clearly disclose how much voting power insiders actually control compared to ordinary shareholders. It's about giving Main Street investors a clearer picture of who's really calling the shot.
Okay, transparency for shareholders. Now let's switch to national security and global finance. A lot happening there, too, especially around digital assets.
For sure. H.R. 2384, the Financial Technology Protection Act, sets up an independent working group. Its job is to figure out how to combat illicit finance, terrorism financing, money laundering that uses digital assets like cryptocurrencies and other new financial technologies.
Because bad actors are using crypto to hide money.
Increasingly, yes. We know groups linked to Russia, Hamas, North Korea use crypto to evade sanctions and fund activities. This bill tries to bring together law enforcement and private sector tech expertise like blockchain analytics firms to better track and stop these flows. Think of the FBI using private firms to seize that $1.5 billion from North Korea's Lazarus Group. This aims to formalize that kind of cooperation.
Got it. Then there was H.R. 1764 about the World Bank's International Development Association, the IDA.
Right. The IDA gives grants and cheap loans to the world's poorest countries. It started issuing its own bonds back in 2018. This bill basically gives IDA bonds the same exemption from certain SEC registration rules that other big multilateral development banks have had for ages. The idea is to make it easier and cheaper for IDA to raise money for its mission.
But there's some political context here too, right? With the administration reviewing participation in these organizations.
Exactly. President Trump had issued an executive order back in February calling for a review of U.S. involvement in groups like the World Bank. So, passing this bill to help the IDA raises bigger questions about the U.S. role in global economic leadership and whether supporting these institutions is the best path forward.
Always layers. Okay, what about the Taiwan Conflict Deterrence Act, H.R. 1716? Sounds serious.
It is. It's a bipartisan effort aimed squarely at deterring China from attacking Taiwan. If there's a formal notification under the Taiwan Relations Act that Taiwan's security is threatened, this bill would kick in.
And what would it do?
It would require the Treasury Secretary to publicly identify financial institutions and accounts linked to senior Chinese Communist Party officials. And critically, it would restrict U.S. financial services for those officials and their immediate families.
So, hitting the elite where it hurts their finances.
That's the idea. Proponents call it sending a clear and bipartisan message with real, targeted consequences. The aim is deterrence, making the potential personal cost for the CCP elite so high that it prevents conflict in the first place.
A financial deterrent. And one more on this front. H.R. 1450, the OFAC Licensure for Investigators Act. What's OFAC again?
OFAC is the Office of Foreign Assets Control, the part of Treasury that enforces U.S. sanctions. This bill tells OFAC to set up a pilot program.
A pilot program for what?
To issue special licenses, allowing certain private sector firms, think blockchain analytics companies again, to conduct tiny financial transactions like maybe $5 or $10 with sanctioned entities or digital wallets.
Why would they want to do that? Send money to sanctioned groups.
It's purely for intelligence gathering. By making these tiny, traceable transactions, investigators can follow the money, map out illicit networks, and uncover hidden wallets or connections. It's a technique that's apparently worked before, like in that Lazarus Group case. This just provides a clear legal framework for it.
Okay, using small transactions to trace big networks. Got it. All right, let's shift gears now from passing bills to some of the more heated political rhetoric and debates around executive actions this week.
Yeah, there was definitely some strong language flying around. We heard, for example, a speaker from Pennsylvania really praising the Trump administration's deregulation efforts, saying it would, quote, unleash domestic production and lead to energy dominance.
And that same speaker also praised Border Patrol and IC, right? Saying with Trump back, they can finally do their jobs.
Yes. But on the flip side, there was sharp criticism of other administration actions. A representative from Delaware expressed real outrage over the policy affecting transgender service members, calling it immoral, unfair, and un-American, and a direct blow to readiness.
And funding freezes were a big topic too, weren't they? Education funding.
Huge concern there. A California representative slammed the administration for freezing $7 billion in education funds right before they were due to go to states with, quote, no warning, no explanation. A Maryland representative echoed that, pointing out how many kids rely on the after-school and summer programs affected.
Was it just education?
No, a representative from Rhode Island spoke out, apparently for the 31st time, urging the administration to restore funding for food aid for malnourished children, saying it had been frozen despite promises. These freezes show how executive actions can have really sudden, significant impacts on state budgets and essential programs.
Though not everyone dislikes funding cuts, someone celebrated the cut to California's high-speed rail.
That's right. A California representative called the project the single biggest waste of taxpayer dollars in U.S. history and criticized the governor for suing to keep it going. So very different perspectives on federal spending priorities there.
And energy policy battles continued.
Oh, yeah. A Virginia representative criticized the administration for policies causing utility bills to rise and giving, quote, favors to the fossil fuel industry. They specifically cited a memo requiring the Interior Secretary to personally approve every wind and solar project, calling it red tape that's cutting off the future of American renewable energy.
And the president himself took action on EPA rules.
Yes, issued proclamations granting 2-year exemptions from certain new EPA emissions rules for several industries: taconite processing, coal and oil power plants, ethylene oxide, chemical manufacturing.
What was the justification for exempting them?
The official reasoning cited was twofold: that the necessary technology isn't commercially available yet, and that the exemptions are in the national security interests of the United States. It shows the executive branch using its power to directly pause environmental regulations based on economic and security arguments.
Okay, let's turn to the Senate. Fiscal policy and judicial nominations seem to cause a lot of friction there. This rescissions bill passed both chambers. What's a rescission again?
A rescission is basically Congress and the president agreeing to take back money that was already appropriated but hasn't been spent yet. So, clawing back funds.
And this particular bill was controversial.
Very. A senator from Illinois expressed deep alarm, particularly about cutting $8 billion from foreign aid and humanitarian assistance. He argued it's going to cost us in terms of lives globally. He also lamented the elimination of federal support for public broadcasting, sharing a story about a local public radio station in Illinois being the only source of live info during an active shooter event. His question was pointed: how could you want an America with less information?
And he ties this to partisanship.
Yeah, he contrasted this rescissions package, which he said passed on a purely party-line vote, with stated desires for bipartisan appropriations, arguing this move makes the whole spending process totally partisan.
Now, there was H.R. 1, the big Republican bill. What were the Senate criticisms?
Primarily fiscal irresponsibility. It was described as projected to add $3.3 trillion to the debt over 10 years and over $30 trillion over 30 years. Critics labeled it as full of tax giveaways for the wealthy.
And there was a procedural fight, too. Something about Section 312.
Yes, this is pretty technical but important.
Yeah.
Section 312 relates to budget scorekeeping, how the cost or savings of a bill is officially calculated. Critics accuse Republicans of, quote, abusing the authority under this section to make H.R. 1 look like it saved money, even though the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimated parts of it added trillions to the deficit.
So, arguing over how the math is done.
Essentially, yes. And critics called this move unprecedented, a lasting change to Senate procedure, and part of an agenda of families lose, billionaires win. It really gets into the weeds of how budget rules can be used, or perhaps misused, to achieve political goals.
Wow. And judicial nominations also stirred things up.
Big time. That same senator from Illinois strongly condemned 2 specific nominees from the Trump administration. First, Joshua Devine for a district judgeship in Missouri.
What was the issue with Devine?
The senator cited Devine's past arguments, apparently in favor of literacy tests at the ballot box, quoting him as saying, people who aren't informed have no business voting. This was slammed as a racist relic from the Jim Crow era. Devine was also called an anti-abortion zealot.
And the second nominee?
Christian Stevens. Criticized for, 1, not denouncing the January 6th insurrection, and 2, for a law review article defending the old 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine. The article apparently suggested these sentences might be beneficial to Black communities.
And the senator's reaction?
He stated flatly, it was wrong then, it is wrong now. He painted both nominees as overly political, aggressive, unprofessional, and serving an agenda rather than the rule of law. These nomination fights really expose deep divisions about judicial philosophy and what's considered acceptable past statements or views for a federal judge.
Seems like it. Okay, beyond those major debates, any other maybe quirkier statements from the floor this week?
A couple stood out. A representative from Florida used his floor time to accuse the WNBA of rigging Game 5 of a playoff series because they, quote, wanted the liberty to win a big market team, superstar faces. He claimed the league manipulated it.
It's claiming game fixing on the House floor.
And a Wisconsin representative expressed concern about the UK possibly lowering its voting age to 16. He worried the trend could come here, pointing to a past House vote where many Democrats supported a similar amendment. His argument was that 16-year-olds lack wisdom and experience, and it's about manipulating these young minds.
Interesting range of topics. What about China and AI? That came up too.
Yes, quite forcefully. A Texas senator described the current era as the most dangerous time since World War II, focusing on China's push for dominance. He heavily criticized ongoing U.S. investment, nearly $2 billion, into critical Chinese tech sectors like semiconductors, quantum computing, and AI.
Why? What's the concern?
His argument is that Chinese tech companies are required to work hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party. So any U.S. investment, especially in AI, is directly undermining the goal of U.S. dominance. He was frustrated that his proposal for outbound investment transparency got stripped from defense bills, blaming powerful special interests.
And the Senate Majority Leader echoed some of those concerns about AI chips.
He did, criticizing the administration. He said, Donald Trump's trade war has created a mess. Now he is rushing to clean up that mess, and he is getting played by Beijing. He specifically pointed to the administration allowing sales of more NVIDIA H20 AI chips to China, chips he said were critical for China's development of DeepSeek AI. He argued it sends a message that America's national security is open to negotiation.
So deep disagreements even within the administration's own party on how to handle tech competition with China.
Absolutely. It highlights that incredibly complex balancing act between economic ties, technological leadership, and national security concerns.
Okay, let's try to put all this in context. We talked about bills passing under suspension. That signals some bipartisanship, right?
It does on the core substance of those specific bills, like the ACS Act or the Firefighter Park passes. It shows Congress can function and find agreement, even if the surrounding rhetoric, especially on broader issues or during floor debates, gets very polarized.
And those floor debates, they serve multiple purposes.
Definitely. It's partly about persuading colleagues, sure, but it's also about staking out positions, signaling priorities to constituents and the public, paying tribute, raising local issues. It's a whole mix. The Congressional Record captures all of that.
And we clearly saw how policy and politics are just deeply intertwined. That VA budget debate is a prime example. Same facts, wildly different interpretations, from accounting issue to criminal behavior.
Exactly. It shows how partisan lenses shape the narrative. Same with judicial nominations. Debates aren't just about legal qualifications anymore, but deeply reflect ideological battles over past statements on sensitive issues like voting rights or January 6th.
And the president's actions continuing emergencies, exempting industries from EPA rules, show that executive power dimension, often justified by national security or economics, which then triggers political pushback.
It's that constant push and pull between the branches, colored by the political climate.
You also mentioned understanding the budget process is key. Those terms, appropriations, rescissions, reconciliation, the Byrd Rule, Section 312 authority, sound like jargon?
They do, but they're the actual tools Congress uses to control trillions of dollars in federal spending. Appropriations sets money aside, rescissions pulls it back. Reconciliation is a fast-track process for budget bills, but the Byrd Rule limits what can go in them. And Section 312 is about who gets to officially score the cost of a bill.
And the fight over H.R. 1 and Section 312 shows how manipulating those rules, or accusing others of manipulating them, can have huge implications for whether a bill is seen as fiscally responsible or not, right?
Precisely. It raises fundamental questions about transparency and fiscal discipline that go beyond just one bill or one party. It really matters how the numbers are counted and presented.
So looking ahead, what's next? Those bills that pass the House on suspension head to the Senate.
Most of them, yes. They'll need Senate approval. The ACS Act, S201, since it already passed the Senate earlier and now the House, goes straight to the president. So we'll see outcomes soon for veterans, small businesses, those local communities waiting on VIP codes or water projects.
And broader trends to watch.
We'll definitely expect continued fights over executive power, executive orders, proclamations, especially around emergencies and regulations.
Fiscal battles aren't going away either, based on the rescissions and H.R. 1 debates.
No way. Federal spending, the debt, how we budget those will remain central, very contentious issues. They affect everything.
And national security continues to evolve, beyond just military stuff.
Clearly, the focus on digital assets, China's tech rise, Taiwan, it shows national security now deeply involves economics, cyber threats, and technological competition.
Finally, those social and cultural divides, transgender rights, abortion access, judicial picks, those aren't fading.
Not at all. Those reflect really deep-seated differences in values and beliefs that will keep surfacing in Congress and elections. They're fundamental parts of the current political landscape.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the week of July 21st, 2025 on Capitol Hill.
And as we've seen, the decisions made there, whether it's about veteran care, your local post office, energy policy, or investment rules, they really do ripple out and affect daily life.
Understanding it all is the first step to having your voice heard. And you can stay informed. Remember, you can look up the full text of bills like S423 or HR 3095 yourself on congress.gov.
Yeah, it's all public record. And congress.gov also has contact information for your specific representatives and senators if you want to share your views.
Plus, committees like Veterans Affairs, Judiciary, Financial Services, they hold public hearings all the time. You can often find schedules and even watch live streams on their websites or C-SPAN.
Definitely worth checking out if an issue really matters to you. So, for our final thought today, we heard passionate arguments this week about budget integrity and how financial dealings impact national security. It makes you wonder, what role does transparency truly play in keeping both our democracy and our economy healthy?
Something to think about. Join us next time on Congress in Context for another deep dive into the issues shaping our world.